Good morning and welcome to the Planning Officers hearing for September 26, 2012. My name is Eric Krause and I will be conducting the hearing as hearing officer. We have 4 cases today. The first 2 cases involve conditional use permits for alcohol, and the second 2 cases involve a conditional use permit and parking reduction permit for a new church. Relevant exhibits are posted on the panels located directly behind me. Under the provisions for Title 30, Chapter 3042 of the Glendale Municipal Code, a conditional use permit shall be granted if 4 required findings are present. And for applications involving the sale, serving, and consumption of alcoholic beverages, there are also 5 criteria that shall be considered in making the 4 required findings for granting a CUP. Under the provisions of Title 30, Chapter 3050 of the Glendale Municipal Code, a parking reduction permit shall be granted if the necessary findings in Section 3050.040 are present. These findings and a discussion of these findings are included in the staff reports that were prepared for today's cases. If the evidence presented in the application and the hearing meets the criteria, then the planning hearing officer can either approve or impose conditions for approval on the cases in question. If the findings of fact are not evident, then the request will be denied. A notification of this hearing was accomplished by the use of public notices, which were mailed to property owners and occupants located within a 500-foot radius of the subject property, physically posted on the site in question and placed in the local newspaper. The hearing will proceed as follows. I'll read the description of the requested entitlements. The case planner will give a brief overview of the case and give analysis and make a recommendation. The applicant will be asked to come forward, stating both name and address, and will be asked to present the case within a 15-minute time limit. Others in support and opposition of the application and interested parties will be asked to come forward to speak, stating both name and address within a 3-minute time limit. Lastly, the applicant will be given an opportunity to make closing comments, if desired, in response to testimony given by preceding speakers within a 5-minute time limit. Then the hearing will be closed and I'll be taking the cases under submission. After the hearing, the decision will be prepared in writing and will be the form of a letter sent to the applicant and to all persons who responded to the public notice, either by speaking at this hearing or by submitting written responses and have provided their name and mailing address. The date of the decision will be the date appearing. The date of the decision will be appearing on the letter. Under the provisions of Title 30, Chapter 3062 of the Glendale Municipal Code, the decision may be appealed to the Planning Commission within 15 days of the date of the decision, and when wishing to appeal, may obtain forms and brochures and procedures from the Permit Services Center, which is located in room 101 of this building. If you wish to speak, please write your name and address on one of the speaker card forms provided by the door and submit it to our planning assistant, Vista, over here. I would like to inform everyone that the official proceedings of the hearing are being recorded as part of the public record. So our first case today is for a conditional use permit, CUP 1223554. It's located at 1132 East Broadway. The applicant is Lit Davtanian. Apologize if I didn't get the name right. The business is Little Russia, and this is an application for a conditional use permit to allow the continued service of alcoholic beverages for on-site consumption at an existing full-service restaurant. It's located in the C3 Commercial Services Zone, High District 1, described as Lots 1 and 2, Tract 611, and portions of Lot 1, Block 24, Town of Glendale Tract, and an alley vacated by Resolution 15281. Ms. Toledo, may I have the staff report, please?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Krause. As you stated, this project is located at 1132 East Broadway. Business name is Little Russia Restaurant. The applicant is proposing a conditional use permit. In this case, it is a renewal to allow the continued sales, service, and on-site consumption of all types of alcoholic beverages at this location. The project is located in the C3 Commercial Zone. It is located on the southwest corner of Chevy Chase and Broadway. There is an existing shopping center in which the restaurant is located with approximately 126 parking spaces. It mainly consists of retail and other types of services, offices, etc. The site is the tenant space is approximately 2,090 square feet. It is surrounded by both commercial and residential uses. I'd like to just jump straight to the findings that staff is recommending approval for this project, and findings in support are available for you as well. One of the items I'd like to highlight is comments from the police department. According to the Glendale Police Department, Little Russia is located in Census Tract 3021.03, which allows for 5 on-sale establishments. Currently, there are 3 on-sale licenses in this tract, and Little Russia is one of the existing. So therefore, they're not increasing the number of licenses in the area. Based on Part 1 crime statistics for the census tract, there were 69 crimes, which is 10% above the citywide average of 63. And within the last calendar year, there was 1 call for police service and a theft report was taken at this location. So based on this information and comments received from the police department indicate that the proposal is not anticipated to create any major concerns for law enforcement or need for additional police service, and therefore overall the proposed establishment has not proven to be detrimental to the surrounding area. One additional thing I would like to highlight is that this particular use, a full-service restaurant, was originally granted a zoning use certificate in 1990. Banquets are held at this facility due to their legal non-conforming right since they were conducting banquets prior to 2002. So that's something to keep in mind because they are classified as a restaurant. It is a permitted use of restaurant. However, because the laws changed after 2002, they do have that legal non-conforming right to continue holding banquets at this facility. If there are no other questions regarding my staff report and the recommended conditions, like I said, staff does recommend approval. And in terms of the hours of operation, I'd like to highlight that the sales, service, and consumption of alcoholic beverages, according to recommended condition number 21, shall be permitted only between the hours of 11 a.m. to midnight, Sunday through Thursday, and 11 a.m. to 2 a.m. Friday and Saturday, and on other holidays which do not fall on a Friday or Saturday. And the same thing would apply as it relates to the banquets that are held at this facility, according to recommended condition number 22. I've also highlighted that banquets or private parties that are held at this facility shall adhere to the same hours of operation that I just stated. If there are no questions for staff, that basically concludes my presentation.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to call the applicant to come forward. I believe his name is Rafi Nazaria. You have 15 minutes to present your case.
Good morning.
Morning, how are you?
My name is, fine, thank you. Rafi Nazarian. I'm the architect for the project. And the applicant is, I'm going to correct the spelling, Lilith Davtian. She's presenting here. My address is 705 Balboa Avenue, Glendale, 91206. First of all, I want to thank Milka Toledo for the Planning Hearing Office's report supporting. Thank you very much, everybody. And this application is really for renewal for an existing condition which we have. As Milka's report shows, there was any problem before anything detrimental to this application. So we are asking you, sir, to renew the application and the conditional use permit, because this restaurant is really a family restaurant, and it's been existing for many years, and located at C3 zone, and facilities in this manner suited to the general plan. Little Russia Restaurant is an establishment appropriated for families and individuals for the neighborhood. The restaurant has been serving its customers for many years. The request to allow for the serving for alcoholic beverages is made to allow patrons of the restaurant to complement their meals with a drink. The CU zone does not restrict the sale of alcoholic beverages in this food establishment. Why will the proposed use and its associated structures and facilities not be detrimental to the public health, safety, or general welfare, or the environment. During the time the Little Russia restaurant has been in operation, it has not had any detrimental effects to the public health, safety, or general welfare, or to the environment. Allowing the sales of alcoholic beverages in this existing restaurant will not contribute to any detrimental effects, as the hours of operation, interior layout, and existing exterior of the restaurant will remain the same. Alcohol will only be served and consumed inside the restaurant, and food will be offered with a drink order. Furthermore, the restaurant has previously served alcoholic beverages under CUP 10671-CU with no issues resulting in detrimental effects on the public health, safety, or general welfare, or to the environment. While your proposed use and facilities not desirably affect to the conflict of adjacent use or impede to normal development of surrounding properties, Little Russia restaurant has not adversely affected or conflicted with adjacent uses during the time that has been in operation. The restaurant is situated in an area that is surrounded by commercial establishments. The sale of alcoholic beverages is permitted in the C3 zone. The sale of alcoholic beverages is not intended as a primary serve, but rather a service to complement food ordered in the existing restaurant. This additional service will not adversely affect the surrounding contents. Adequate public and private facilities such as utilities, landscaping, parking, space and traffic circulation measured or will be provided for this proposed use. This is an existing establishment and always met the City of Glendale's requirements for such an establishment. As Mishka's report stated, it's and I thank you for the support. I still ask you for renewal of the conditional use permit.
Okay, I did have a couple of quick questions. In terms of private parties, do you know about how many private parties you have during a calendar year?
The establishment is not that big. There's usually the private parties in the community, Armenian, especially Armenian, Persian. There are like usually more than 300, 400 people, but this is just 89, 90, up to 100 people seatings. And parties are very small and usually like just birthdays or little celebrations.
Is that every weekend, or is it just
no.
a couple times a month? Or
It's maybe a couple of times a month.
okay.
It's not every weekend, no, definitely. Because as stated, the big parties, the private parties, especially weddings and all these engagements, they're asking for big banquet halls, more than 300, 400 people. It's very small. So.
Now, the police mentioned there was one call for service. Do you have any idea what that was for?
It was a long time ago. I don't know. The previous owners.
Was it directly related to, was it call for service for the restaurant, or was that just some other business in the center, do you know?
I really don't have any idea, but we never, previous owners never mentioned that call, and even when I asked the neighbors any problem, any questions, they never recalled that call even.
Do you know if I guess you said the owner's here too, you know if she has that information?
This is a new owner, but previous owners, that call
came with the previous owner?
Previous owners,
okay.
Yes. I have no idea.
I don't have any further questions, and I don't see any other cards. Is there anything else you wanted to add?
Just, I appreciate your help, Mirka. Thank you very much for the staff, and I hope you will grant this.
Actually, as far as the conditions, Ms. Toledo mentioned, the condition number 22, 21, 22 basically for hours of operation. Is that consistent with how you guys are currently operating now?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so you're okay with the conditions?
Yes. You're capable to meet follow any conditions.
Okay.
And we're willing to cooperate with them.
Great. All right, thank you very much. I will be taking this case under submission, and we'll be running a decision within the coming weeks. Thank you very much. Our next case today is located at 241 South Central Avenue. This is conditional use permit case PCUP 1227846. This is, the owner is Target Corporation, and this is for a conditional use permit to permit the continued sale of alcoholic beverages at an existing department store located at 241 South Central Avenue in the downtown specific plan in the Galleria District Zone, described as lots 5, tract number 24714, and portions of lot 3 and said tract number 24714. Have a staff report, please.
Yes. Good morning. This is a renewal of a conditional use permit for the sale of general alcohol, which would include beer, wine, and spirits at an existing retail store. As mentioned, it is for Target. The conditional use permit, PCUP 2007-019, was approved in 2007 and was valid for a period of 5 years. So the corporation is coming back to actually renew and continue the sale of alcoholic beverages. As detailed in the staff report, the use is consistent with the Downtown Specific Plan development standards requiring a CUP for alcoholic beverage sales. It has not been found to be detrimental to the surrounding community, nor detrimental to the public health and safety. In regards to the findings made for the number of alcoholic beverage sale licenses in the area and the concentration, or not concentrate, the concentration of alcoholic beverage sale licenses and the crime statistics for this current census tract. It should be noted that ABC, there is a recommendation for 4 off-sale establishments in the census tract. Their recommendation is for 2. There are currently 4, and Target is currently one of those 4. So it is has not been deemed to be an over-concentration, given that it is already one of those 4 existing ABC licenses. The Target is located in a high crime census tract rate. Most of those crime statistics are due to shoplifting in the Glendale Galleria and in the Americana. None of them are directly related to the sale of alcoholic beverages. So staff, based on the police department's recommendation, is recommending approval of the new CUP. As noted in the proposed findings and conditions of approval, this CUP is suggested to be valid for a period of 10 years instead of the previous 5, given past operations and no issues with regards to the sale of alcoholic beverages. There are also references made to the comments submitted by the police department in regards to the hours of operation. The police department has recommended that the sale be limited up to 11 o'clock p.m. In speaking with the applicant, there had been a request made, given that Target is open later during the holiday season, that the sale of alcoholic beverages be allowed to also be later in conjunction with the store hours during the holiday period, and that the recommendations by the police department state that no wine should be sold in bottles less than 750 milliliters, so it would be the full-size wine bottles. There is the sale of, while the Target department store is more than amenable to prohibiting sales of individual containers, such as individual bottles of beer or individual cans of beer, there are multi-packs of wine that are available for sale, and so Target would like to be able to sell those multi-packs, knowing that it's solely in multi-packs and not in individual wine containers. So those would be the 2 items in regards to the police department comments that staff would like to mention, and I'm sure the applicant is in the audience and will be mentioning those during her presentation as well. That concludes staff's hopefully brief presentation. I'm available to answer any questions.
Great, thanks very much. I have the applicant come forward, please. I believe it's Beth. You can state your name and address, please.
Good morning. Beth Abalafia. I'm with Hinman and Carmichael, 260 California Street, San Francisco, California. I represent Target. I'm representing Target this morning, and I do the alcohol beverage licensing for the Target stores in California. The staff report was very complete, and so I think I can be brief. We are requesting a renewal of the existing conditional use permit that was issued in 2007. When the store first opened, Target's been selling alcoholic beverages since 2007 without any problems or incidents, and so we are asking that the use permit be continued. I will say that since the permit was originally issued in 2007, Target has, at this store, along with most of its other stores in California, implemented what they call their P-Fresh remodel, which is an expansion of their grocery section, both in size and in terms of product selection, to include more fresh fruits and vegetables and fresh meats, more of a full-service grocery section. And so alcoholic beverages are just one small component of that grocery section. They're not a major focus of Target's, what Target sells, but they are a convenience to customers who are in the store shopping for other things and want to be able to pick up beer or wine at the same time. So the police have indicated that they don't have any concerns about renewing the conditional use permit, and staff is supportive, so we are requesting approval for the renewal. As staff indicated, there were two conditions that we would like to request some modifications to. First, with respect to the hours, the store's regular closing hour is 11 p.m., which is what the currently proposed condition states, so that's fine. But during the holiday period from Thanksgiving to New Year, Target stores do have extended hours. They're open until midnight, and so we would like to be able to continue to sell alcoholic beverages during that extended period that the store is otherwise open during the holiday period. And also with respect to condition number 2, with respect to wine products, there are wine products that are packaged in multi-packs where the individual containers are less than a 750 bottle, but they're packaged in multi-packs and they're not split up and sold as individual containers. So we would like the ability to sell that product as well.
Okay. I kind of had a quick question about, now you said that there's no individual sales for beer either, because kind of the going trend now is the larger 24, 22-ounce bottles of beer. Is that something you guys would be providing? You sticking with 6-packs, 12-packs, that sort of thing?
We're not doing that.
Okay. So everything comes in packaged, basically.
Yes, and in the current condition, the condition on the current conditional use permit requires that.
Okay. Now, that was kind of one question I did have in terms of the existing CUP. Maybe you can answer this, or Ms. Sementitis. Does the existing condition you have there in terms of timing, does that allow it to go beyond 11 o'clock now?
No, the current condition is 11, and
Okay.
so what we have to do currently is, during the holiday period, cut off alcohol sales at 11, even though the store is otherwise open.
Okay. I don't have any other questions at this point, so I will be taking this case under submission unless you have anything else you want to add. I don't see any other speaker cards. So.
Nothing else.
Okay.
Thank you.
And I will be taking this case under submission and be running your decision within the coming weeks. Thank you. Oops, excuse me. I'm assuming this large crowd is here for the third case today. We have a project located at 3013 Montrose Avenue. This is for a conditional use permit case number PCUP 1201488, and a parking reduction permit case number PPRP 1201430. The applicant is Christian Life Church, property known as Randy Foster, and then the project description is an application for a conditional use permit to construct a new 7,475 square foot church to replace the approximate 12,500 square foot church that was demolished in 2009 due to fire damage. The two existing auxiliary buildings will be maintained and located at 3013 Montrose Avenue in the R1650 medium-high density residential zone, described as portions of Lot 1 and Lots 2, 3, 4, 5, and 14 of Tract 4535. A conditional use permit is required for places of worship in the R1650 zone. The application for a parking reduction permit is to allow for 50 on-site parking spaces, which is less than required for the new construction located at 3013 Montrose Avenue in the R1650 medium-high density residential zone. Ms. Zematitis, may I have a staff report, please?
Yes, Mr. Kraus. As you just stated, the project before you is for the rebuild of a church. The previous church was approximately 12,500 square feet, and actually, according to the insurance adjuster, it was actually 13,300, but that is unsubstantiated at this point in time. But again, the previous church was 12,500 square feet. It was burnt down, or the roof was actually burnt down back in 2006 because the building department was unable to substantiate whether the existing foundations would be able to uphold a new roof and certain wall members. Unfortunately, they required the demolition of the entire church. As such, with the demolition, the church grounds lost their legal nonconforming rights to the church use in the R1250 zone. Because the church has to be rebuilt, they have to go through the process of obtaining a conditional use permit to have a place of worship in the R1250 zone, 1615 zone. And at this point in time, because they have to rebuild the church to today's standards, the existing parking standards come into play. And the previous church, as based on the submitted survey, and forgive me for, I need one moment to... Okay. So, as shown here on the survey, the previous church was built all the way up to the corner of Ramsdale Avenue and Montrose. They had an existing parking lot that featured 50 parking spaces around the perimeter of the lot. There were also 2 accessory buildings. One was approximately a 950 square foot office building, and then there was also around a 2,000 square foot accessory building that provided for offices and additional classroom areas for the previous preschool. The church itself not only contained a sanctuary or a larger assembly area, but it also had a preschool operation, and it also included multiple classrooms in conjunction with a church operation. So the previous church actually had a conditional use permit for a preschool and grade school, grades 1 through 3. This conditional use permit was good for daily operations, so there was a church use for the church services for holy days and Sundays, and then there was also a daily activity up to 60 children for the preschool and grade school activity. The church, as you see here, is now the new church is being proposed, again, at the corner location. They are maintaining the 2 accessory buildings that did not burn down as part of the fire, so they are going to maintain the existing 900 square foot office building as well as the approximately 2,000 square foot office/classroom building. Now, the classroom building would essentially be for Sunday school operations. They are not proposing a preschool or grade school operation at this point in time, so the CUP is solely for the place of worship in a R16 in a multifamily residential zone. The church itself features an assembly space of approximately 2,000 square feet. According to today's code, with a parking ratio that is of 28.6 spaces for every 1,000 square feet of assembly area, this assembly area plus the assembly areas for the classroom purposes in the adjacent detached structure would essentially require approximately 82 parking spaces on site. Noted in the previous conditional use permit for the nursery school operation, I just put up the plans that were submitted for, and this is for the previous CUP for the nursery school operations. You'll notice that, and I want to go back to my figures, there was a much larger sanctuary that was for the church use, and they also had an additional assembly area that was also used for the preschool, so that they basically had 2 assembly spaces that at that point in time, had you added up this assembly space, the main sanctuary that is, the secondary assembly space that was also used for the preschool, and the assembly spaces in the detached, in the smaller detached accessory building, the previous church would have required approximately 132 parking spaces on site. Again, going back, they previously only had 50 existing parking spaces, and they are requesting now a parking reduction to have 50 parking spaces on site, but all of these parking spaces would be within a reconfigured parking lot that would meet all of today's required dimensions, backup area, landscaping, and other parking standards and regulations. So. Okay. Going back through the history, the previous church was constructed in 1922. It had been in operation up until the fire in 2006. So the church itself was in operation approximately 90 years at this existing location. The church itself, or the church grounds and the surrounding area, were part of LA County up until 1952, when it was annexed into the city of Glendale. So obviously there was no conditional use permit required when the church was originally constructed. It was in operation. Because of the fire, now they have to rebuild a new church, and today's standards require that it obtain a conditional use permit. Church uses are consistent with the general plan, which recognizes the need for religious institutions throughout the city. The reestablishment of the church itself is not expected to be detrimental to the public health or safety or general welfare. There had been an existing church in operation approximately 90 years prior to the fire damage and demolition, so now they're just reestablishing a church. The use itself is not anticipated to adversely affect or conflict with the adjacent uses. There are 7 such places of worship, churches themselves, between Ramsdale and Montrose Avenues. So there are additional religious institutions in the surrounding area. Again, unlike the previous discretionary permits, the previous CUPs, that was for a daycare nurseries on the site. The CUP is solely for the place of worship, solely for a religious institution, so no daycare facilities are proposed. As part of the redevelopment of the project site with the construction of the new church, all private and public facilities, utilities, landscaping, and parking will be provided for the church, except for the said parking reduction permit request to essentially maintain 50 on-site parking spaces that are in compliance with code. Staff believes that all CUP findings can be made in a positive manner, and staff recommends approval of the CUP application. In regards to the parking reduction analysis, as previously mentioned, the previous church was 12,500 square feet. The assembly areas based on the CUP plan submitted, and this would be for the CUP plan submitted as part of the conditional use permit for the nursery daycare, and this was back in 1989. So again, the plans, as you'll notice, actually the plans are drawn on graph paper and somewhat a little not as professionally done as today's architectural plans, of course, but it looks like, based on the drawings that would be scaled, the previous assembly area was approximately 3,000 square feet versus the 2,100 square foot assembly area proposed in today's church. The previous church also had an additional assembly area of approximately 1,750 square feet, and that's not including all the other additional classrooms and preschool operations as well. So the previous church had a much greater parking demand. The existing church is much smaller in size and scope and intensity because they are not proposing a preschool daycare operation as well. All of the 50 current on-site parking spaces are in compliance with today's standards in regards to the width, the length, the backup, the required landscaping. They're also providing handicap spaces, which were not actually shown on the previous plans as well. The site is located in an area with a great concentration of multifamily residential developments. There are a few single-family homes and, again, several other religious institutions on Honolulu Avenue. There is, and again, staff never alludes to on-street parking. All parking must be provided on-site. But while there's quite a bit of traffic activity on Ramsdale during the work week and school weeks because of the school located directly to the north of the freeway, there is available parking sometimes on Ramsdale Avenue. Should also be noted that the parking on site, I want to double check that with him. The parking off site, there's also parking available on Montrose as well. They are going to have to make improvements to the intersection for ADA handicap accessibility, but those off-site improvements are going to be part of, if it moves forward, the design review, essentially. So those are coming down the road. In conclusion, because the intensity of the existing proposal is obviously less intense than the previous church activities, staff is supportive of the parking reduction permit. I received 2 telephone calls, one from a Mr. White, who had great concerns regarding the parking. Even though we in the planning department did not have any records of complaints and neighborhood services did not have any records of complaints, it appears that there had been, I should say, records of complaints, meaning actual physical documentation that there had been issues with the previous church and the parking itself. Mr. White mentioned that there were great concerns because the previous church appeared to have rented out their facilities, and so there were 2 churches operating at the same time at the previous one. Again, since it was a much larger church and there was also probably a much larger congregation, and there were multiple congregations because the church was being rented out, there were parking impacts. But again, this could not be confirmed with any documentation in the planning department. There was also a Ms. Lowe who called and who was unable to attend today's meeting, and she was in support of the project simply because there had been a church, and she was much more supportive to the fact that they're reestablishing a church at this location. She would much rather have seen a church here than an additional high-density apartment or condominium building. So with that said, those were the only parties of interest that either called or left letters. I do see there is a great number of individuals out in the audience, and the applicant, the architect, Mr. Terry Char, who we've been working closely with, is available to answer any questions you have regarding the church building, and Mr. Randy Foster, who's the pastor and chairman of Christian Life Church, is also in the audience to answer questions you may have.
Okay, I had a couple of quick questions, and maybe you can work on this while the applicant's
Of course.
talking. In terms of the seating for the assembly area, I believe in the code there's a provision for fixed seats as well.
There is
I'm not sure if those pews would be considered fixed seats under the code.
and again, we could not, the pews would have been fixed seats because there is a parking provision, like you were saying. It's either a general assembly area at 28.6 spaces per 1,000, or I would have to double check in regards to the linear length of seating, for fixed, or the seating for fixed seats, essentially. But, and this is the best that staff is able to do, comparing apples to oranges, which you can't really adequately do in this case. We just based it off of the actual size of the assembly area. So,
Okay, now the entire site is zone 1650, correct?
Correct. The entire site is zone 1650, which is a...
kind of the only, you mentioned off-street or on-street parking or whatever. Now, I went out there too. I didn't notice that there's any restrictions on any of that on-street parking. I don't know if you can verify that.
There is no special permit parking for the area. No.
All right, thanks very much. I have two speakers for the owner. I have one for the owner, one for the applicant, and then also for the architect. I don't know if you would need to share the 15 minutes for the time on that, if you want to both speak, or if one of you just wants to speak. I have a card for Randy Foster and also for Terry Tarr, so I'm not sure which one of you wants to come up.
Thank you, Mr. Kraus. My name is Randy Foster. I'm the pastor of Christian Life Church. I reside at 3147 Encinal Avenue in La Crescenta. My wife Charlotte and I have had the privilege of serving as the pastors of Christian Life Church for the last 2 years. And as has been mentioned, and Bill, you did a wonderful job of presenting who we are as a congregation. We're celebrating 90 years this year, next month in October. The church began on the corner of Sycamore and Glenwood in 1922, and shortly after purchased the property that has been mentioned on the corner of Montrose and Ramsdale. And the congregation grew to well over 200 in just a very short time. By the 1940s, it was incorporated as an Assemblies of God church, and as been mentioned, in 1951, a larger sanctuary was built on the site. As you are aware, in December of 2006, the church burnt down, and the city determined that needed to be destroyed. It cost the congregation hundreds of thousands of dollars to get rid of the destroyed building, and that, of course, came out of the insurance money. Not only were the buildings destroyed, but the school and the preschool were forced to close. Many people in the community who brought their children to the church and looked to the church for Christian education had to be displaced, and the congregation that was running about 150 at that time dwindled down to about a third of that. Also displaced by the fire, as was mentioned, was a large congregation that was leasing the church from us. The previous large sanctuary and two-story classrooms, offices, and fellowship hall was 12,500 square feet with, again, the 50 parking spots that we currently have. Today, obviously, we're proposing a much smaller building. We would love to build a bigger building, but we cannot. And it's going to be 7,500 square foot, single story. They originally designed a building that the Design Review Board turned down because of its looks, and it didn't fit the community. We've come back with a brand new design for the building. Met several times with Villia and with some people from the Design Review Board, and they're very pleased with the look of our new church and feel that it would complement the community. We are aware, as was mentioned, that there were previous parking issues with the congregation who rented our facility, which was twice the size of the Christian Life congregation. These individuals parked throughout the neighborhood, in some cases illegally parked, blocked people's driveways, and frustrated, even though there may not have been formal complaints. We have talked to several of the neighbors, and there were issues of people blocking driveways, and people couldn't get out of their house on a Sunday afternoon. Since the fire, that particular congregation that was leasing from us has now moved to another building, a First Baptist Church in La Crescenta. And, of course, the size of building that we're trying to build, they would not accommodate them whatsoever, so we would never lease back to them. You mentioned the movable seats versus fixed seats. One of the reasons why we are not wanting to put in pews, per se, or fixed seats is the fact that we've also lost, Bill, you mentioned a 1,700 square foot fellowship hall where they would do banquets, wedding receptions, funeral dinners, and those kinds of things. But we don't have it. We're not going to be able to have that in this facility. And so what we're asking for is to have movable seats. So at times for weddings and various things, we can set it up for dinners and receptions. We'd love to have whatever seating we could get, and as many as we could get, but we understand the square footage, we're limited. We're willing to live with that if we can have the mobility of not having fixed seating. We're anxious as a congregation to get the project started and request the parking variance, and we're looking forward in October during our 90th anniversary celebration to breaking ground. Even if it's ceremonious, at least we can move in the direction of getting the building built. So thank you very much, and if you have any questions.
I had a couple. Well, you answered some of the questions I already had. So,
Okay.
one of the kind of questions in terms of leasing this space, do you intend to do that with this church space
At this
as well?
point, we
or-
don't. I cannot say that in the future that they wouldn't, but obviously they could never rent out to a congregation as large as they did before. It would have to be limited to the number of seats that we have.
How many members do you currently have for the church? And do you,
We have attenders right now around 50.
in kind of your heyday, I mean, what were you up to at that point?
I wasn't there then because we've only been here a couple of years, but my understanding that it was 200 to 300 in its strongest. But during the time of the fire, it was closer to 150.
Okay, but you don't. I mean, this current building wouldn't be able to support that large of a congregation either, would it?
It would support 150, but it wouldn't support 250 or 275, which is kind of where the previous church that we leased to was at.
Okay.
So again, if they leased, it would have to be limited to those number of seats, and the fire marshal could come in at any time and say, "Hey, you're trying to get too many people in here," and shut it down. We understand that.
Okay. Thank you. I believe they still have some time left. I don't know if your architect would like to come up and take some of that time. State your name and address, please.
Yes, Terry Tarr, 520 Raspberry Place in Oxnard, California. I'm the architect on the project. I'd like to thank you, Eric, for hearing us on this, and to Vilja for all her hard work over a long period of time as our planner. Staff report was very, very well stated, so I don't have that much to contribute. But I did want you to know that we met previously with a different concept with the Design Review Board and planning, and had gone through a lengthy process with that. And they wanted some changes. They wanted us to move the building into the corner where the previous building had sat. And the squeeze that happens because of the acute shape forced us partially to make this dramatic reduction. So it took us a while to go back to the congregation, determine, okay, we're going to eliminate the preschool, we're going to eliminate some other scope that they wanted that would have fit the 12,000 square foot previous facility in terms of a rebuild. But we couldn't do it in this location and maintain the other parts of the property that were necessary. The other big issue was landscape. So the new ordinance is 25%. The previous conditional use permit didn't have that requirement. There was probably 5 or 10% of the property that was landscaped at the time. And we also have a 20-foot setback on Montrose, 5-foot setback on Ramsdale. None of those existed at the time. So that the previous building that was in the corner didn't have those constrictions. And so when that all vetted out, we ended up with about a 7,500 square foot building that could fit here and still have the other functions on the site, like some play area for the children, some outdoor spaces for fellowship, plaza type spaces. We also responded to the DRB related to the architectural style. I'm not going to get into that. That's not really the germane to this hearing, but the style of the building is very much different and a much more expensive building. It'll look a whole lot nicer, but that also forced us with the square footage. A very limited budget because it's a fire burn situation, and with a new use permit, you have to upgrade the entire property. We have to upgrade some things along the street. So there's a lot of costs there that the fire insurance does not cover. We recognize that, and so another reason we had to squeeze the building down in its square footage. The net of that is, of course, dramatic parking reduction, so 5,000 square feet less of functionality. So we're asking for the approval on the parking reduction, of course, as stated in all of the reports. So we felt like we've responded very well to the city's wishes. It's taken us a while to get there through a pastoral change and all those kinds of things, and so there's this long lag time in terms of the congregation, waiting for something to happen. So we really appreciate being able to move forward on the project. Related to the parking count, Delia mentioned there's the bridge parking, which is an easy walk. There's probably room for 30 or 40 cars up there. There's a frontage road along the freeway. where there's no houses to that side. There's room for 30 or 40 cars there. We also have an agreement with a law firm down at the end of Montrose. It's outside the city limit in terms of the distance, but it's outside by about 15 feet. I physically measured it myself. And there's 12 parking stalls there that we're welcome to use. So when you add all of that up, that's 60 or 70 parking stalls that would not be in a frontage of a house. In addition to that, of course, is the parking along Montrose and along Ramsdale that Velia mentioned already. There's about room for about 25 cars there, and those are shared with the neighbors all the time, and they're not designated, but they're open, and some of them are going to typically be available on a Sunday for congregational use whenever they are open. When you add that all up, it's 100 stalls that if the congregation, and I've talked to the pastor about his willingness to do this, issue a regular flyer to the congregation saying, please don't park in the neighborhood. Here's our little map of where we are allowed to park. And so then that opens up the ability to be a good neighbor for most people. You can't control everybody's life with something like that, but you'll control a lot of them. Churches tend to be very cooperative people. Let's see, I could talk about the building, scale, different things, but I'm not sure that's germane to...
Yeah, at this point, in terms of design or anything, we're
it's
not
more a
really
design
focusing on-
review board that's going to look at those
Correct,
kinds
right now
of
we're
things.
just focusing on the use and the parking reduction.
Exactly. Sustainability, I could talk to that, but I'm not sure that that's germane either, so...
Yeah.
Okay. Very good. Well, I will thank you for your time, and would like to see an approval.
No, I did see that.
Any questions?
There's a parking study prepared by, I believe, your firm. Some kind of.
Comments.
It's comments,
Okay.
yeah. I wouldn't call it a study so much as comments based on, I am a church architect. That's what I've done for the last 20 years, is primarily church facilities. So you gain a lot of experience, what works, what doesn't work. I was going to talk about the, sort of like the 80% rule. I think that's in there. So a typical congregation can't push past 80% of their seat count. So it's really about 150 seats. The plan shows 188. If you do the math, that 150 seats is what they'll bump up against, and it's just the way churches function. When people feel like it's too full, they'll go to another church, and it's an odd thing, but there is a real truth to it, and we've seen that in church after church. So we look at the project as 150 that would be attending as sort of their peak. You might do a special event, but a special event can also have controls. In other words, you put monitors out on the parking lot. Parking lot's full, you direct them where to park so that they're not into the neighborhood. It's the Sunday after Sunday where it gets annoying if they're parking in the neighborhood. And of course, it's harder to control, other than, as I mentioned, of maybe doing a flyer.
Okay. I did kind of have one question. This is probably more directed towards the pastor.
Sure.
If you could come back up here,
Thank you.
please. Thanks very much. In terms of how many times would you guys be doing some service? Would it be like a couple nights a week and then on the weekends, or?
We're currently doing Sunday services from 10 to 11:30, and we also do a Wednesday night, kind of a family night, where we have children's ministries and adult Bible studies going on.
Okay.
So those are the two primary meeting times for the church. Sunday morning, you could say 10 to noon, and Wednesday night, which is 7 to about 8:30 in the evening.
Okay. And currently, those are the only kind of two times you're really using this
Yes.
space. Okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, so one quick question for Mrs. Imatitis. In terms of the parking calcs where it came out to 82 spaces, that included both assembly areas in that calculation, correct?
The 82 parking spaces were based on the approximately 2,000 square foot assembly space in the new church building, as well as the classrooms within the existing detached building.
Okay, great.
So when you combine the two, it came out to 82.
Okay, great. Thank you. I have several speaker cards here today. Each one of you will be giving 3 minutes. When I call you up, I'd like you to state your name and address, please. The first one is Cass McCloskey, I believe. Yes, ma'am. Please come up to the microphone, yes.
I was actually hoping to address the congregation. I have my back to them, and I apologize for that. Give me a couple credentials. I'm a neighbor living directly across the street.
Could you state your name and address?
Oh, I'm sorry, Cass McClaskey, 4116 Ramsdale.
Thank you.
neighbor across the street, long-time pastor parish chair until they exhausted me, and those of you who've served on a church committee know exactly what I mean. So I have sympathy for what the church goes through. I want to tell them that for many years, I lived there when the old church was there, and I liked approaching the intersection and seeing the steeple. I had to deal with the school problem every weekday, every morning and afternoon. But the day of the week that I dreaded most was the one that church was there to serve, and that was Sundays because of the parking problem that it created. Now, you don't have anything on record because I tried to handle it unofficially. Notes on windshields, notes left in the narthex at the church to get people to stop parking on Fairway. I never had my driveway blocked because I don't have a driveway. And my access to my house is street parking like anybody else. On Sundays, I either had to stay away or stay in the house, not go to the grocery store for Sunday dinner, or if I went to my own church, I could not return to my own parking space in anywhere near my house. Now, this went on well into the day, largely, I believe, because of the rental to the other church. Because it was a very large congregation. And they parked up on my yard, and it was not a happy thing. And so that in looking at some of the stuff that Gabriel has, who was going to talk, I see that there has been what seems to me a very well-intentioned address to that problem in that they've delineated Mayfield because it has the freeway on one side. It's not. They have avoided mentioning Fairway, and that's a good thing because Fairway is the street that has no public. I mean, it's all public, but it all fronts private property. It's a narrow street. We have no sidewalks, so people tend to pull up more onto your property instead of in the street. And the unfortunate thing is, it's the closest side street to the church, so that all good intentions in their thing, which seem to address the problem of Fairway, I give them credit for, and as church people, I know they mean it. And my question is, how are the intentions of their permit enforced? Because, again, being a pastor parish person, a lot of pastors, they come and go. So you have, what is the continuity between today's hearing and the rest of the time for that church's activity there, which I welcome. I welcome what they do. It's how it impacts on that period of time, that either where people park and for how long they would be necessary, because before, this would go till 3 in the afternoon. And what precludes the next pastor, the next administrator, whatever.
I need you to quickly wrap up if you could.
Yeah, from doing that. That's my question. How are their intentions enforced in the permit, if at all? Oh, could I say something about the tree, or has that not got anything to do with this?
Yeah, that wouldn't have anything to do with this at this
Well,
point.
I don't know how they got past through Glendale.
Okay, thank you very much. Next speaker is. We're not going to be talking about the tree at this point. Thank you. Crystal Brubeck.
Hello,
Good morning.
my name is Crystal Brubeck, and I have attended this church since 1936. And I was devastated when it was. I am asking for permission that we can rebuild. I have a lot of history in that church. I was married there. My daughter was dedicated there, and it's extremely meaningful to me. So I would appreciate your consideration. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Bonnie Chapman.
Bonnie Chapman, 215 South Adams Street in Glendale.
Thank you.
And I've been a member of Christian Life Church for 15 years, not long in the scope of 90. I just would like to comment one thing on the parking. I live in Glendale, and I go to church several times a week, like Pastor said, Sundays and Wednesdays. I always have, well, I'll say 99% of the time, I always have someone else with me. Usually 2, sometimes 3 people. And a lot of our other members of the church also come with multiple people in their vehicles. There's even a few that walk. I think there's very, very few that come in single vehicles. Just, in the last 6 years, we've experienced heartbreak and tears, hard choices, scaled-back version of the church, no school, smaller church. And during this time also, we've had heartfelt hope, joy, love, and prayer and faith has sustained us. And we want to be a landmark for another 90-plus years for our family and friends. We love the community, love our church, and we love the neighborhood. So we would appreciate you approving the conditional use for the less parking. We would love to rebuild now. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Florence Roberts?
My name is Florence Roberts, and I live at 2869 Sycamore Avenue in La Crescenta.
Good morning.
I'm 82 years of age, and I have been in the church since I was 17 years of age. My husband and I raised our children in the church, and we love the church. And anything that you could do to give us favor for that parking, so that that church will be there as long as perhaps maybe I'm going to be, I would really appreciate it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Diane Racy?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Diane Racy, 2967 North Verdugo Road, Glendale. Been at that residence for over 44 years. Been a member of Christian Life Church. It's been my church home for almost 25 years now. And I was probably one of the last people out of the sanctuary the night of the fire. And it was devastating to stand there in the parking lot and watch it burn. And it's been hard the last few years. But what I can say is in the 20 years previous, before the fire, I never had a problem parking. I never had to park in the street. It always seemed more than adequate for our Sunday morning congregation. So I think with the smaller meeting room and combining it with the ability to have a fellowship hall that we can again have our whole congregation in the same room at the same time would be wonderful. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Gabriel White?
Good morning. My name is Gabriel White.
Morning.
I live at 2963 Fairway Avenue, which is directly opposite Cassidy here. I first of all wanted to acknowledge the pastor and just say, he's really reached out to the community. We had a lot of concerns, and he's done his best to address that. But as Cassidy also mentioned, and as I called you, there's no mention in the report because there was no official complaints made by the community of the frankly horrific parking situation that there was previously. I should make it very clear that from what I understand, it was the afternoon service that rented when the church was renting out to another organization that was a problem. The Christian Life Church was, as I understand, never really particularly a problem at that time. I understand that Randy has just been a pastor for 2 years, so he wasn't here previously. The previous church had rented out to this other organization. I believe it was up to 275 people. The 50 parking spaces were absolutely woefully inadequate. In fact, the people that we bought our house from actually privately admitted to us just the other day that one of the main reasons they moved out was because they could not stand a single Sunday more in that house because of the parking, because every Sunday Fairway Avenue, this unimproved road with no sidewalks, with children walking around, was just swamped with cars. And unfortunately, the congregation of the other church that it was rented out to were not as community-minded as perhaps this church. So there's no mention of Fairway Avenue in any of the paperwork. So what I wanted to do is to request that some kind of clause was put in that forbade or required a further review of any rental to another organization. I don't know how in the future, if Randy, moves on or things change, things evolve, the congregation, gets significantly larger, how exactly we deal with that if there's problems in the future. I have no doubt that this congregation is very well intentioned and will do their best to, make life, great for all of us. My fear is if maybe they fall on hard times, they have to rent it out to another organization to try and pay the bills or whatever reason that a church rents to another church. That is really the problem. Or when, like I said, in the future, I'm talking 10 years from now, because this day is setting a precedent for the next 90 years. In the same way that the previous church, was set for 90 years, it was never acknowledged that the 50 spaces was woefully inadequate. It was grandfathered in. So the decision that you make, on this project will have repercussions for the future for the residents. And, even though, it has 188 seat capacity, you can say, well, churches sometimes do, sometimes don't, maybe it's 150. The fact is, it's 188 seat capacity that the city has made clear, calculated, using formula to figure out the optimum number of spaces. I'm not really going to say I'm against the project. I'm also representing many of the residents of Fairway Avenue who unfortunately were unable to make it this morning due to work commitments, but rest assured that many of the residents feel like this way. One final thing, there's no mention of noise. I was also informed that on Wednesday evenings, up till 10 p.m., there was loud music, and to a degree where, in fact, the sheriff got called to the church, which sounds kind of crazy. It's not a nightclub. I realize they were probably singing or some such thing. Now, I understand that in the current, the outline, the plan, there's no mention of, any of these activities. But again, in the future, 10 years from now, that's what we're concerned about.
Okay, thank you. I did have one question in terms of, would you be amenable if there was some way to prevent parking along Fairview, and would that
that's another possibility
address some of the parking
resident
issues, or is it more or less around the neighborhood?
I can't speak for other roads. If some sort of resident parking system for Fairway Avenue, that's a possibility, I guess, for Sundays. Something like that would be, we would love the whole road to have sidewalks and be made safe, because frankly it's very unsafe.
Okay.
But yeah, some kind of residential system, that would be fine. Whatever, you're the experts, but
Okay,
we cannot have what happened before ever happen again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It should also be noted that that portion of Fairview is actually located in Fairway. We keep saying Fairview, but it's actually Fairway. Is actually in the Los Angeles County. So that's the unfortunate thing. So Glendale would not be able to, we don't have any authority to regulate. What we could, and I don't want to speak for the planning hearing officer, we could recommend a condition of approval that the church make it known that parishioners shall not park on Fairway. But we essentially, the city ourselves, we don't have any authority or jurisdiction over LA County property. So.
Okay, thank you.
One half of the road, LA County beyond.
Yeah.
Correct. Yes. So.
All right, is Peggy Masterson? Is that correct, or Reggie? All right. Apologize. You're not Peggy at all.
Peggy. Good morning. My name is
Morning.
Reggie Mares. I reside at 42 Northwoods Lane, La Crescenta, which is directly adjacent to their property. I first met the pastor and his lovely wife and several of their members on a Wednesday evening when, at that time, one of the residents in the complex left the water sprinkler running too long, and water was draining down into their parking lot. And because I'm a board member at the facility, they came in and they read my name and they rung my bell. I came down, I met with them, they showed me where the water was going. So we were able to turn it off, which saved the complex a lot of money. But my point is that I believe that they're very good neighbors. I think that they have the real heart of the community in play when they're making decisions. When I first moved there about 3 years ago, they had a fence around with some kind of stuff to keep the dirt from blowing out. Within the past year or so, Pastor Randy has leveled all that out, put some grass in, made it look very beautiful. They painted some of the fencing, new parking lines in the back. So it's making the community look a whole lot better. And the only thing I can think of is that when they build the building, that's just going to enhance the value of the property in the community, which makes me very happy as a homeowner. So I think that it would be very good if you guys would approve their permit for use in that facility. Thank you for your
Great.
time.
Thank you very much.
All right.
I don't see any other speaker cards. Do we have anyone else that would like to speak? If so, you'd need to fill out the card. You guys are going to get some time to speak again. Yeah. Anybody else? Last call? Okay. So the applicant now has rebuttal time. You have 5 minutes. If you'd like to comment on any of the...
Again, Terry Tarr, the architect on the project. I would just like to make a recommendation, and maybe, Vilya, you can word this in appropriate fashion. I just spoke with Pastor, and he's amenable to this, that you write a condition that addresses the parking issue, something to this effect, that Christian Life Church will make arrangements with L.A. County for no church parking, quote-unquote, signs on Fairway. Is that right? Fairway? Fairway. After all that banter, I started to mix it up. Exactly how that needs to be worded, maybe that needs some additional conversation. But I think that will start to address the issue. So if we had signage down that street that said simply no church parking, the parishioners I think, are going to honor that. And you can't make 100%. It's just if you get 90%, you've solved it in terms of the quantity of parking that might still happen for someone who is going to ignore it. So I don't know if there's a way you can stipulate that. Okay.
Great, thanks. Speaking of conditions of approval, have you guys, Pastor, have you read through all the conditions? Are you okay with some of the proposed conditions that have...
Yes, we've read through the conditions and are comfortable with those. A couple of quick things in closing. I would like to say, in talking with, I went up and down Fairway and talked with many, if not most, of the neighbors of these that were here, and they've not had a problem in the last 6 years since the fire of parking. And has been said.
We live on the corner.
Yeah.
That's why.
Yeah. They've not had a problem. The other thing is, because the question was about the future, Pastor Randy may be gone, the church may change demographics. Three of the board members, in fact, my 3 board members are here today, and I speak for them, knowing that they will, whether I'm here or not, maintain goodwill with the community. That's why would a church want to build a new building and then make all the neighbors mad? It just doesn't make sense. We will maintain in the years to come.
Great. I did have one other question before we wrap up here. In terms of, you have the church building itself, and then also you have the other classroom building.
Classrooms,
Now, I understand from reading the staff report that classroom building will be used for service, during service for children.
During service for children's ministry.
So you wouldn't be using the spaces concurrently or whatever for different events.
No, we wouldn't rent out some of those classrooms to somebody else at the same time. It would be the children of the people who are in the worship center would be in a classroom setting at the same time.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your time.
I don't have any additional questions, so at this point, I'm going to officially close today's public hearing. I'll be running your decision within the coming weeks. Thank you for coming.